Hello and welcome to today's PIR live event brought to you by Partners in Research Canada. My name is Stacey Joyce and I will be your host. Remember that you can ask questions anytime throughout the webinar during the presentation or the Q&A section at the end. And to do so, just go to the top left-hand corner of your screen if you're with us live and click chat. Make sure you change the to field of your chat so that it reads all panelists and attendees. And along with your question, let us know perhaps something about you, where you're joining from, your school name, your teacher name, or sometimes even a student name if you wish. And we'd love to give you a shout out when I ask your questions. So today's guest is Dr. Elisa Romano. She is a professor in the Department of Psychology at the University of Ottawa. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. I will turn it over to you.
Thank you. Can you see me in my presentation?
I do not see the presentation yet.
Okay. I need to share it again.
Yes. So that'll be the green button in the middle at the bottom. And then full screen. You got it. All right, we're up and running. Thank you.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, thank you so much for inviting me today. I'm really looking forward to talking to you a little bit about mental health and also answering any questions that you might have for me after my presentation. As a young person, what does it mean to have good mental health? And generally, it means that you're feeling good about yourself and the things around you. So it means you're taking good care of your feelings in a way that's helping you. It means that you're making good choices for yourself. And good mental health means that you have people around you, family and friends, that you can talk to and that will understand what you're thinking, what you're feeling. And finally, having good mental health means that you're able to do all the important things in your day-to-day life. Things like going to school and being able to learn, going to school and feeling good about being with other kids, having relationships with people, whether they're your peers or grown-ups that make you feel happy, and just generally following the rules that we have in the world, like not hurting other people, taking good care of our environment. So that's basically how we can define good mental health. Now, having good mental health doesn't mean that you never experience tough times or that you never have a problem or you never have a difficulty, but it means that you have the tools within you to really manage those difficulties and that you have people around you that you can really trust and that can support you and that can help you when things are going tough. There's so many things that can affect the way young people feel. And that can make a young person feel sad or mad or scared or confused or worried. It could be things like having an argument with a friend, not being invited to a party, not doing well on a test, perhaps moving to a new school and a new home. But usually these kinds of feelings, they don't last too long once you've had a chance to talk to someone about them. And once you can figure out a way to solve a problem, like how to sort of be friends again with someone that you've had an argument with. There are other experiences, though, that young people might have that can lead to really big feelings that last a lot longer and that can really make it hard to do things like get along with others, go to school and concentrate, those sorts of things. And these experiences might make kids want to scream or yell or cry or hit. They might make kids feel worried, scared, and even ashamed a lot of the time. So there are many experiences like this that can really affect mental health and just the ability of a young person to go about their day and to be the best that they could be. It could be things like somebody really important in your life being hurt or sick or dying. It could be not being treated nicely by other kids or by your parents and your family. It could be getting ignored a lot at home and at school, and so feeling like you're alone and you don't belong. It could be getting hurt at home by your parents or being around people that are hurting one another. And it could also be something like not being able to live with your family because it was really hard for your parents to take good care of you. So these kinds of experiences are usually really tough for young people, and they can definitely affect a young person's mental health. So it can affect a young person's feelings. It can affect the way that young people think about themselves and the world around them. And having those kinds of feelings can make it really hard to do the things that kids need to do in their day-to-day life, like go to school, be with other kids, and just feel happy. So mental health problems can definitely affect young people. And some research shows that for every 8 kids, there's at least one who's experiencing a problem with mental health. So that's experiencing feelings that are really, really hard, and that's experiencing problems and just kind of doing everything that kids need to do in their day-to-day lives. So it's pretty common, and we really need to take mental health problems in young people seriously. So we as grown-ups, we need to believe kids when they're talking to us about difficult feelings, when they're talking to us about difficult things that happen in their life. So we need to believe kids, we need to support kids, and we need to help kids as much as we can. Especially when kids are turning to us as grown-ups, it means that they need our help and we need to be responding. So it's true that mental health problems can be really hard for young people because you can have lots of really big feelings and lots of mixed up feelings. And these really big feelings, these mixed up feelings can make it really tough to do things like focus at school, to get along with other kids and grown-ups, and just to feel good about yourself as a person. But even though mental health problems can be really hard, there are many, many things that young people can do to make themselves feel better. Young people can do things like getting involved, getting themselves moving, being involved in activities where you feel really good about yourself and you feel really competent and a sense of success. So that can be so many things. It can be things like listening to music, reading, being involved in a club, a sport, playing with your pet, going for walks, anything that makes you feel really good about yourself. Now, one of the most important things that kids can do when they're really struggling with their feelings and they're having a hard time is to talk to someone that they can trust. And this has to be somebody that they know will believe what they're telling them, that will support their feelings, and that will help them to figure out a way to solve a problem that the young person might be having. There are many people that young people can turn to. It can be family members, and that could be parents, siblings, aunts, uncles, grandparents, cousins. It can be friends. It can be teachers. And sometimes kids might also want to talk to professionals that can help kids who are having a hard time with their feelings, or with things that are happening in their life. So this could be people like myself as a clinical psychologist. It could even be people like guidance counselors, social workers. And when young people do reach out to professionals like myself, I would typically work with the young person to find ways that they can feel better and find ways that they can solve some of the problems that they're experiencing. But I would definitely need to work with important people in the life of that young person and people that they can trust. And that could be family members and it can be teachers, for example. So the more that young people can think of ways to make themselves feel better, the more that they have people that they can trust around them to talk to, the more that kids can feel connected to other people and be involved in activities, whether it's in school, outside of school, the better the chances that they will experience good mental health and that they will kind of get through some difficult experiences a lot sooner. So all of those strategies that I was talking about, the things that young people can do for themselves, but the ways in which people they trust can help them, all of those things can make young people resilient. And that's a word that we use a lot these days. But what it basically means is that even though a young person might have experienced some difficult things in their life, it means that they're still feeling good about themselves. They're still doing all the things that they want to do in their day-to-day life. So that's what we really want to help children that have experienced difficult things to be resilient, to feel good about themselves, and to have a lot of people around them that are looking out for them and that they can turn to when they want to talk and when they need support. So this is one of my last slides here, and I do want to talk about children's rights. And here what I want to say is that when young people have a problem with their mental health, they have the right to feel better and to find a solution to whatever is making them feel sad or scared or mad or confused or worried. And they also have the right to rely on people in their lives to help them out with these feelings. So as a young person, you do have rights. And in fact, there was a document that was developed a long time ago in 1989 by the United Nations. And this is just a group that has a bunch of countries in it. And they developed the Convention on the Rights of the Child. And what all these countries said is that children have rights, and they listed about 50 of them. But they kind of fall into three main categories. And one is that children and young people have the right to protection. And what that means is that as a young person, you have the right to feel safe, and you have the right to not be hurt, either physically or emotionally by anyone. The United Nations also said that children have the right to provision. And what this fancy word basically means is that as a young person, you have the right to all the things that kids need to grow up safe and healthy. So you have the right to good food, to have a home, to have clothes, to go to school, and to have a family that's taking really good care of you so that you can grow up feeling safe and healthy. And the last right that you have is the right to participation. And what that means is that as a young person, you have the right to share your opinion and to voice your thoughts around matters that concern you. And your perspective ought to be taken into account along with the perspectives of other people in your life, like maybe your family and your teachers. So when young people have all of these rights protected, they experience good mental health, they feel good about themselves, and they feel good about the things that they're doing in their life, whether it's with other kids, whether it's at home, whether it's with family and relationships. The last slide I want to put up is the Kids Help Phone. So this is a 24-hour service. It runs 7 days a week, and there's one number for everyone across Canada. And so if you're ever struggling with the situation that's happened to you, or with the situation that you're currently experiencing, and you're having these really big and mixed up feelings, and you don't have a lot of people to turn to, there's always the Kids Help Phone. And these individuals know how to talk to young people. They will keep your information anonymous, and they will try to be that person that you need to sort of support you, understand what you're going through, and maybe give you some ideas about how you can start to work on the difficulty that you're having. That's it for me. I've kept it, I think, relatively brief. So I do thank you for your attention, and I will be really happy to answer any questions that you might have for me.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Romano. That had lots of good information, leading to lots of questions already. If you caught me furiously looking to the side and typing away, I was copying questions out. We have one class in Toronto who's particularly curious and ready to ask. So I'll get right to it. If you want to go ahead and click that red stop share button, we'll just be able to see you a little larger. Excellent. So let's go first to a question from Grace at Rolfe Road. Grace is asking, what is the most common thing that gives you mental health issues?
I don't have one answer for that, because if you look at it as different pathways, let's say and there's many different mental health problems that children can experience. They can kind of feel sad a lot, so that's more with your mood. Young kids can feel worried a lot, so that's more like anxiety. Some other kids, when they're not feeling well, they might express it more onto others. So they might get upset a lot at other people, they might yell, they might scream. So there's different ways that young people tell us that there's something going on that they need help with. There's different ways of expressing it. And the way that you can get to, having a difficulty with sadness or with other people or with being worried, there's all these different pathways. Sometimes it can be things that are happening at school. Sometimes it's things that are happening at home. So it's a combination of things. And one thing I can say is that the more that things are happening, the greater the chances that it's just going to become too much for you as a young person to deal with. So it's kind of like it adds up over time, which is why it's really, really important to listen to young people early and to try to help young people younger so that they don't have to sort of struggle as much as the years go on. Grace, does that answer your question, sort of?
So Grace, if we've missed the point there for you, please feel free to let us know with another question in that chat. For now, we will continue on with a few of the other questions. Owen N is wondering if bullying can lead to mental health issues.
Absolutely. Absolutely it can. As a young person, you have the right to be treated with respect. You have the right to have a place at school, at home, to have a voice. And whenever someone is hurting you with their words, with their actions, that's going to have an impact on the way you feel, on the way you see yourself as a person, and kind of how safe you feel in your environment, whether it's at home or at school. So absolutely, bullying can impact your mental health. And there's a lot of work that's being done on bullying, but I do think that as grown-ups in the lives of young people, we need to take bullying a bit more seriously. It's not just something that happens to all kids. It's not just kids will be kids. It can have a huge impact on the way kids feel about themselves and the way they think about themselves. And any time that a young person turns to a grown-up to sort of say that they're being bullied, we need to take it seriously and not minimize it and dismiss it.
Right. Nora in Toronto is wondering, can you help having bad mental health? So can a person help it if they have bad mental health, is I think what that question is.
Absolutely. You know, sometimes with mental health, we can think of it like as physical health, in the sense that suppose in our family there's sort of a history of diabetes, or there's a history of obesity, or there's a history of that, you know, a kind of a physical health problem. Sometimes as the kids, we're kind of a little bit more vulnerable. So we kind of have to do things to watch ourselves a little bit better, just because we might be more susceptible, more vulnerable. It's the same thing with mental health, in the sense that in families, sometimes you have anxiety that runs in families. Sometimes you have depression that runs in families. So what that basically means is that we sort of have to be a bit extra careful, because we're just kind of at a bit of a higher risk for that, just like we would be at a higher risk for like a physical health concern. But that, it's never, like with physical health and mental health, it's never like if A, then B. It's never a straight line. And there's many different pathways. And the one thing to do is to recognize early on that something is not feeling right for you, and to try to get help as much as you can. You as a young person probably have already a ton of strengths, and sometimes it's just kind of recognizing what your strengths are. And what's really important, though, is to use the people around you that you trust to talk to. Because the more that you can work together with someone and kind of brainstorm on what you can do to help yourself feel better, the closer you will be to finding a solution that fits for you. So even though, like with physical mental health, we might be kind of more vulnerable to certain things, it never has to be a certain way. It's never a straight line. And there's many, many things that we can do and that people around us can do so that we feel really good about ourselves and the world that we live in and the day-to-day activities that we have to do. I hope that helps.
Yes, thank you. I have so many questions here. I'm trying to decide which one to go to next. We have, I'll go with one that we're seeing, this question from both Jabin in Comox Valley, BC, as well as Charlie in Toronto, asking the same thing. Do children have more mental illness problems than adults?
That's a hard question to answer. Because you have to be able to recognize what's a mental health problem. And I think that sometimes in children, as grown-ups, we don't believe that kids could be struggling. You know, as a grown-up, we would say, like, what do kids have to worry about? You know, they don't have a job. They don't have to worry about making money. They don't have to worry about putting food on the table. How can they have a mental health problem? And that's not really a very helpful idea to have. It's true that the things kids are doing in their life are different than the things adults are doing. That's why you're a kid, and that's why we're adults. But it doesn't mean that you can't also be having a tough time. So I don't know exactly what the right numbers are. You know, it's kind of like 1 in 8 in children, but that's maybe an underestimate, because there's a lot of kids that are struggling and we just never know about it. And in adults, it's something like 1 to 5, 1 to 6. So it's pretty comparable, but the way that kids and adults might express that they're not feeling right could be quite different, because of things like how developed a child's language is. Just their ability to express that they're not feeling right could be different than the kinds of words that adults do. But the bottom line is mental health is a serious concern in young people, as it is with adults. But I think it's really important to work with young people, because the more that we can sort of figure things out with that young person earlier, then the better the chances that they don't have to struggle for years and years and into adulthood. So it's a kind of prevention to work with young people.
Right. And we have a question now coming from a grade 8 student in St. Mary's, Ontario, saying they've heard that mental health issues can be lifelong. What is meant by this?
Right. So that's a nice follow-up question to the one what I just said before, is that if you experience difficulties as a young person, and if you feel like there's no one that you can really turn to help you out, and if you're not really sure about what you can do yourself to help you out, then the chances are you will continue to experience difficulties, right? So because there haven't been any strategies yet that have been put into place to help you out. But the more that we can recognize that a young person is struggling with their mental health, the more we can recognize that earlier in life, and the more we can sort of put all our heads together and try to figure out what it is that's very difficult in the young person's life and give them some tools, then they don't have to follow that path. There's many different paths. And one of the most important ones is the one I was saying, resilience, is that even though there have been some difficult things that you might have experienced in your life, if you can get help and find ways to help yourself, you might be just fine. And there's many, many people that have experienced difficult things earlier on in their lives that are doing just as well as people that haven't, because they found a way to help themselves, and they also had people around them that could help them. And sometimes that might even be professional help, people like myself. So there's lots that you can do, is the bottom line.
Excellent. And maybe a quicker question here from Ben in Toronto. Just wondering, what is the average for how many people have experienced some mental health issues in Canada?
Right. So the stat that I presented is that if we think about 8 kids, probably 1 in 8 has a mental health issue. So that's pretty common, I would say. So if you are struggling with a mental health difficulty, often young people feel like they're the only ones and that there's something wrong about them, to be kind of feeling sad all the time, or to be feeling confused all the time, or to just be angry all the time. But what you need to know is that you're not alone. And sometimes kind of knowing that you're not alone, and knowing that there's people around you, whether it's your family, your friends, or even professionals, mental health professionals, that there's people around you that want to help, that can really break the isolation that a lot of people feel when they're struggling with a mental health difficulty.
Right. And I see by the time that we're getting right toward the end of our scheduled time here, I am going to continue with a few more of these questions. So if you can stay with us, please do. If you have to leave because it is recess or something similar, don't worry, you won't be a disruption to us. So right now I have a couple of great questions from Comox Valley, BC. Olivia in grade 6 is wondering, in this vein, you were just talking about how thinking that we're not alone if we're experiencing any mental health issues or struggling somehow. Olivia is asking, how can we as a friend help someone with a mental health problem?
Yeah, that's a really good question, right? Because part of being friends is not only kind of doing fun things together and listening to all the good things that are happening in each other's lives, but it's also being there when things are tough. And that's like a true test of a friend. I would say the most important thing you can do is listen and believe. Sometimes we think, and this could be kids that think this way and certainly grown-ups, that when someone has a problem, we need to figure out a solution for it right away. But sometimes the things that kids are experiencing, there's no real easy solution. Like, it's going to take a bit of work. So, but one thing you can do is say to your friend, thank you for talking to me. I believe you. I can see that you're hurting. I believe what you're saying. Thank you for sharing. You're not alone. And let's work together to figure out what we can do to help you with this problem, to help you with these feelings. And sometimes that could mean turning to a grown-up that you do trust, like a teacher, like a parent, like someone else in your family, a coach, anybody that you trust, because they might also have some other ideas to help you, so that you don't feel like you're all alone and that there's no solution. There's always a way to work on a mental health problem. It's just sometimes it takes a bit of work to find the solution that's right for you, but there's always somebody that will help you.
Right. And we have a question from Hannah in Hillcrest. This one's a bit more specific. Hannah's wondering if your eyesight can be impacted by your mental health.
Oh, wow. Okay. That is a very interesting question. And as far as I can tell, I have never come across any research to show that there's a link between your eyesight and mental health. So I'm not aware of anything, but I'll keep, my eyes open, if I can use that expression, to see if there's any research like that, but I'm not aware of anything like that.
Okay. And we have another classroom in Toronto, Ontario that is asking, what is the age when most kids start having mental health problems? Maybe the most common age?
That one is also a tough one to answer, because at any age, you can be experiencing a mental health problem. It's just that the way you would show that to somebody else is different. So even if we think about a young child who maybe hasn't even started talking yet, but who often feel, who doesn't really explore their environment very much, whose language is delayed, who doesn't seem that interested in sort of the world around them, and we can sort of say, we need to do something with that infant because they're not really developing in the way that we would expect an infant to develop, which is to sort of be curious about anyone and everything. So here's an example of, I don't know if we would call it a mental health problem, but we would be concerned about that infant's development because they're sort of not doing what infants typically do in terms of development. And it kind of depends, right? So then when you start school, then it's more around being able to learn, being able to focus on your academics, starting to have more relationships with peers. So we would expect that when kids start school, they're able to work on their academics. They're starting to be able to form friendships, that kind of stuff. So here's where, if we see that a child isn't really kind of doing what we would expect, we can sort of then start to wonder, well, what's going on for that child? What's going on maybe at school? What's going on at home? What's going on with their development that's sort of making it hard for them? So one way that we gauge is we say, okay, here's what we know about, typical development, whether it's language, your brain development, physical development, emotional development. Here's what we know kids typically follow in terms of those pathways. And one way to judge if a child might be at risk of a mental health problem is if they're sort of really off track from the pathway that most kids follow in terms of their development. And then our goal as mental health professionals is to do everything we can to put children back on track.
Right. So it sounds to me then that there is no common age. It's not that, around 6 years old, you're starting to really be concerned. It could be any age, anything going on in that child or even that adult's life. Is that correct?
Yeah, that mental health problems affect all children of any age.
Right.
And it's just that sometimes what's most important to you, depending on your age, like if you're an adolescent, there's certain things that are going to be more important for you to be doing. You kind of gauge it by where children typically are at a given age to sort of see how close you are to that or how much you're away from that. and how much that's bothering you.
Right. So I have two questions I want to get to before we wrap it up today. One is from Gavin, who's a grade 7 student in Comox Valley, BC. Gavin asked, what can you do to prevent mental illness? So are there maybe one or two top of the list things that students can keep in mind?
Yeah. I think that something's really important is to always check in with yourself and always kind of ask yourself, how am I feeling? Am I feeling good about myself and who I am as a person? How are my relationships with other kids, with grown-ups in my life, like my teachers or my parents? So the more that you can check in with yourself, the earlier you can sort of say, you know what, I feel sad a lot of the time, or you know what, I'm always getting into arguments and it's kind of getting in the way of me having really happy relationships, or feeling sad all the time. It's really getting in the way of me wanting to be with people and go out with people. It's really getting in the way of me being able to learn at school. So I think that the more you can check in with yourself and the earlier you can sort of say, I just don't feel good about myself. I don't feel good about the way that I am. Then we can, and the more that you can then communicate that to someone that you trust and that will help you to find a way to feel better, that would be one strategy. I also think it's really important to not put all the responsibility on young people. It's really important for us as grown-ups that are involved in children's lives every day, as teachers, as parents, as coaches, to kind of look out for the kids and kind of say, you know, I've noticed that Betty is looking really sad these days, or I've noticed that John is getting into a lot of fights and he never used to fight. So the more that we as grown-ups can be tuned into kids and to pick up on the cues that there's something that might not be going right for that young person, then we also have that responsibility to reach out to the young person and try to say, hey, I'm worried about you. Like, it seems like lately you're not yourself anymore. What's going on? I want to try to help. I do think that as grown-ups, when we do that, though, we have to commit to helping that young person. We have to stay true to our word.
Right. And so a very different question here from Charlie in Toronto, who was wondering, how long did it take to become an expert on mental health? So maybe you could tell our students, in case this is something they are developing a passion for, how long did that take for you, and what kind of path, what did that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the fact that I'm still at a university kind of, it means like I've never still stopped going to school. And that's because I really like this environment. I like school. I like being at university. And what I do is I teach. And I teach in the area of difficult experiences that kids have and how we can help them. And I teach how to be a psychologist like myself, so how to work with young people, how to talk to them, all the strategies that they can use with young people and their families. I also do a lot of research. And my research is a lot like, what kinds of interventions can we do to really help kids with mental health, especially when they've had some really, really difficult experiences growing up. And in addition to being a professor and teaching and doing research and having my own students that want to be psychologists like myself, I do work with young people. So I actually work as a mental health professional, and I see children and I see adolescents, and I work with them and I work with their caregivers to figure out ways that we could all work together to make sure that that child achieves whatever objectives they have for themselves. And usually it's to just feel good inside of themselves and just to do well in their life. But basically, you go through elementary school, you go through high school, you get your undergraduate degree at a university, and then you go for your master's degree and your PhD. So you do have to become a PhD, a doctor, And then what you have to do is, depending on the province you're in, you have to register with that college so that you can say, you can call yourself a clinical psychologist. And to register here in Ontario, it's with the College of Psychologists of Ontario. You kind of have to pass tests. So just like you, I was studying a lot. I had to pass tests in writing and also in interviews. And then once that happens, you can become a clinical psychologist. So, and then what's really important for us is that even once we've become a professor or a clinical psychologist, we always keep reading. We always keep learning, just like you are, just so that we're always up to date on what's important, what's happening around us, and that our skills can get better and better. It's a super rewarding profession, and I would be happy to talk further about it.
Well, thank you so much. Your passion is evident in everything you've told us today. So thank you so much for taking the time and for answering our questions and giving us maybe some strategies for having a look at ourselves to make sure that our mental health is in a good place, and for helping those around us, or for how students can reach out for help on their own if needed.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. And thanks for all the great questions. They were amazing. Thank you.
And next on PIR Live Event, we're learning about how and why animals communicate. A bit of a different topic than today. You can find out more information on this and our other educational programming at pirweb.org. Thanks so much, everybody, for tuning in today, and have a good one.